Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Serious, all people of Reddit, what is the most weird, creepy, or unexplainable thing that has happened to you between the hours of 2 a.m. and 5 a.m.? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Not the worst, but definitely the straight up most what moment I've had at those hours. Walking home from work at a bar near an area not all unfamiliar to gay male prostitutes, this guy comes up from across the street. He walks up to me and asks me if he can ask me a favor. He asks, "I'm leaving tomorrow morning. Your feet look really nice. Can I pay you to touch them?" Now, I'm wearing black tights and a skirt and full shoes, so I'm just confused even more. He just kept asking and pleading that he was leaving and really wanted to touch some feet. But for $20, yet he was well dressed, brand streetwear, just so effing creepy and gross. I just eventually told him, "I'm sorry. You seem really nice, but I don't do things like that with strangers. I'm sorry." So glad he wasn't violent, because that's what I'm used to. It was just really strange that he was so pleasant and formal. He told me to have a good night, like, "Thanks, friendly neighborhood pervert." You know, this story reminds me of the time when someone asked me, never mind. I live out in a rural area. There used to be train tracks everywhere, and you still sometimes find the bridges for them over various creeks and rivers around time, but never any rail. My parents and other older family members always told me they took them up in the early 90s. I'm a heavy sleeper. Despite these things, every once in a while I wake up because I swear I hear a train blaring its horn and the distant low rattling of one passing over tracks. It usually lasts for about 10 minutes, but one time I swear it kept going for 20. I share a room with my mom because we only have 2 bedrooms, and one night I woke her up when it happened and asked her what it was. She got a perplexed look on her face and listened and eventually just said, I don't know. She heard the noise too, but she swears there aren't any functioning railroads around for miles. You ask anybody else in our town and they'll tell you the same. Both of my parents were born and raised here, if not all, then most of their lives, so they're familiar with the territory. Neither of us can explain or tell the direction it's coming from because it kind of echoes around a little. It's not super creepy, but it's definitely weird and unexplainable. It happened once, maybe every couple of months. We're not particularly close with the neighbors since we're kind of spread out and one of them is a jerk, but I keep meaning to ask a friend that lives way down the road in the direction if sometimes sounds like it might be coming from, if he's ever heard it. My grandparents' home was built in the 1800s, and the previous owner killed himself by drinking lye back in the 1930s. My grandmother seemed to think he was still around and mentioned cryptically once she always kept her bedroom door closed at night to prevent visitors. One summer I was about 11 and spent 2 weeks at their house, sleeping in an unused room upstairs. One morning about 5 a.m., I heard the door between the downstairs and the upstairs creak open and someone start to walk slowly and laboriously up the stairs, breathing heavily and pausing on every step. This wasn't so strange because my grandparents and father were also staying in the house, but the more I got to listening, it didn't sound like any of them. I lay in bed in a cold panic listening to whatever it was make its slow, anguished way to the top. Finally, I heard it reach the top step, and I forced myself to turn my head and look at the top of the stairs. Not surprisingly, no one was there. I must have fainted at this point, for I remember nothing else. I refused to sleep in the room again. Once I got home, I told my mother what had happened, and she told me that a decade or so before, when she was pregnant with me, she had the same experience, at the same dark hour of the morning. When she heard whatever it was climbing the stairs, she made the mistake of calling out to it, thinking it was my father. It then stopped, but soon continued climbing. My mother said it then pushed open the partially closed bedroom door and began to pull the covers off the bed. This was enough for her. She dashed down the stairs and refused to stay in the room again. Presumably, whatever it is continues its nightly roaming, whether it has an audience or not. I woke up to a light rain, opened my window a little to let the breeze and the sound of the rain help me get back to bed, and I heard the most stock zombie groan sound come through the window. I looked and didn't see anything. So I'm just assuming my neighbor did the exact same thing I did, but had a more visceral reaction. I was sitting on the balcony around 2 or 3 a.m. smoking. I have a lot of flowers in pots, some are hung, some are on the ground. I also have lights and you can see pretty clear. All of a sudden, one of the flowers just started shaking as if wind was blowing it, but there was no wind and all the other flowers stood still. I kept my eye on it and around it thinking it was a bee or some kind of bug, but I didn't see or hear anything. Plus, it was shaking in a way that human hands would shake it left to right. One night I was on my laptop doing some schoolwork around 3 in the morning. I was sitting in the living room on the couch when I heard the back doorknob rattling. My mind instantly thought it was an intruder, but it had not registered in my head that it was an intruder, so it went something like this. Oh, somebody's trying to get in my house. Oh, somebody is trying to get in my house. I got up and sprinted to my room. I do not investigate. That's stupid in my opinion. I grabbed the bow and arrow that was hanging on the wall. I do archery, and I'm pretty good at it if I do say so myself, and sat in my bed with it. A couple of minutes later, I got up and opened the door only to find that it was still locked and nobody had entered. I was pretty creeped out, and I went back inside my room for the night. The next night, I was up late again, but I was just on my phone when I heard something that sounded like super quick footsteps at the end of my bed. Imagine when a dog gets hyper and runs around on carpet floor and its nails dig into the carpet. I shut off my phone to make sure that it was not my phone making that noise. Keep in mind, it's 3 in the morning, lights are off, and the sun has not risen yet, so it's pitch black in my room, nothing but darkness. Then I hear that noise again, but this time it's directly next to me. I turned on my phone flashlight and looked around the room to find nothing. I have really bad anxiety, so when things like this happen or something, I freeze up, and sometimes I go into panic attack. I ran out of my room and I ran into the bathroom, shut the door behind me, and locked it. I stayed in there until maybe 7 or 6 in the morning, to the point that the sun had risen. I did not sleep in my room for maybe a week. When I finally gained the courage to sleep in my room again, I went back to the room and FaceTimed my friend. We talked for maybe 45 minutes before the footsteps happened again. It was around 4 in the morning. I started to freak out, and my friend started trying to calm me down. She succeeded in calming me down, and I ran out of my room and asked her if she heard the footsteps too, and she said she also heard them. To this day, I have no idea what caused the footsteps and doorknob rattling, and I probably never will find out. TLDR. Doorknob rattles and footsteps kept occurring during the night, and I don't know what is causing it. A few years ago, I woke up and I really had to use the bathroom. My bedroom doorway is sideways to my mother's, and when I looked into her room, I didn't see her in bed. We have a nightlight in the hallway, so we don't trip at night, etc. I thought that maybe she was in the kitchen, so I walked past the living room and checked there. Nothing. When I get to the kitchen, I switch on the light and see nothing. I feel stupid that I didn't check the bathroom earlier and think she's probably in there. So I walk toward the bathroom and check her room once again in case. Still nothing. I get to the bathroom and come up empty again. I shrug it off as I am not completely awake and don't think much of it. The next morning I'm getting ready to leave and I ask my mom where she was last night, and she tells me she went to bed around the time I did but never left. I asked her if she ever got up in the night and she replied no. You might be thinking I probably just missed her, but at the time we lived in a very small apartment, so I doubt I could have missed her. I'm sure there's an explanation of some kind, but I think it's creepy that I didn't see her at all. Once when I was younger, probably 13 or 14, I stayed up late AF on a weekend, later than I had ever stayed up before. To set the scene, the bathroom is at the end of a short hallway with one bedroom on each adjacent wall, mine and my sister's. Standing in front of the bathroom facing away from the door, you can only see part of the living room at the other end of the hall. I walked out of the bathroom and could only see the armrest of the couch in the dark. I saw a leg hanging over the armrest, kicking kind of enthusiastically. It makes sense. I didn't hear any noise or any indication that it might have been someone I live with. I freaked out and locked myself in my room and sent my mom a text because I was too scared to go across the house to her room. I slept with my door locked, and when my mom knocked on my door in the morning to ask me about it, I told her what happened, and she thought I was crazy. My stepdad, who was sitting in the chair I had seen the leg on the night before, told me it was probably hallucinating. As I've gotten older, I've started to believe that it might have been him, because I started to notice him in a similar position during the day. But if it had been him, why wouldn't he react to me moving around the house? Why wouldn't he react to me taking a little too long to turn off the bathroom light? Why didn't he make any noise? To make matters worse, my mother admitted to me that she had some experience around the house that she isn't ready to tell me about, which is not comforting. We also had the house blessed at one point because of things that were happening. This one might be able to be explained, but I'm not sure. So, my neighbors are actually part of my family, and we live in a shady neighborhood. Sometime near 3 or 2 a.m., my mother wakes up and goes outside to take a call. She suddenly notices someone standing in front of our neighbor's door. She twists the knob once. Locked, she leaves, and we put it off thinking it was nothing. These next 2 stories don't take place at 2 or 5 a.m., but they tie into the previous story. I'm over at the neighbor's house, and at the time, it was me and my 14-year-old cousin alone. I don't hear it, but my cousin tells me he heard the door open. Nobody we know should be at the house right now, so we grab some baseball bats and go to investigate. The door is shut, nobody to be seen. We look in every room, nothing. We could just play this off as my cousin's imagination, but a week or 2 later, my cousin's sister wakes up to the sound of the door opening. Once again, nothing to be seen. Your thoughts? TLDR. Our neighbors kept hearing their front door open after someone in the middle of the night stood at the front door. No one had opened the door. I'm not a big believer in ghosts, but here it goes. Me and my friend decided to see if we could summon a ghost using a Ouija board at 3 a.m. Oh boy. Keep in mind, neither of us believe in spirits or ghosts, and we both think Ouija boards are fake. We were mainly just screwing around. So, we're in his dad's scary-ass basement. We're screwing around, asking dumb questions like, how did you die? And who killed you? Of course, no one responds to us. So, my friend decides to turn off the lights and light a single candle. The candle was lit, but immediately the flame just vanished. Well, burnt out, was blown out. Except, me and my friend were in front of the board, and the candle was on the top left corner. We just thought it was one of us on accident. After about 15 minutes of trying, it's now around 3:40 a.m. We gave up and went to bed on sleeping bags we had set up down there. We left one of those electric voice phenomenon recorder things. The good ones were like $50+, so we bought a dinky $15 one. Although my friend was on the other side of the basement and he was asleep before me, when I started to doze off, I felt a hand touch my shoulder and I opened my eyes and it was daytime. I think the clock said around 7 a.m. No, it was not like a magic thing where a wizard dude taps me and poof, it's day. It was weird. The best way to explain it is this. Ever started to doze off or sub continuously and not realize you are awake a tiny bit, but mostly asleep, and you don't even wake yourself up? It's just like your brain shouting at your body, get the F up, lazy ass, and you suddenly are more awake now, but you don't remember anything that happened before you started to fall asleep, and you're confused, and you don't even know how much time has passed, and sometimes more time has passed than you think without even thinking you know, and not being completely asleep. What? If you don't, just use your imagination. That's how it felt, but instead, something I felt woke me up, and it looked like hours passed. There's not much help on Google, and the whole experience was just weird and definitely hard to forget. How many of these posts do we have to read before people stop playing with Ouija boards? I'm not so much into the occult and supernatural, but even I know that much. I was in Australia and staying at an Airbnb. The house had modifications and they added on a whole new part of the house. This is where my family slept. I slept in the original part of the house. I slept but suddenly woke up around 3 a.m. I heard whispers and what sounded like people walking around. I even kept hearing the hissing of snakes. I called out hello several times, but there was no answer. I asked my family in the morning if anyone was walking around or if they heard anything, and they answered with no. I'm from the US, so it was like 5 p.m. where my friends were, and I nonstop texted them. Ended up staying awake for the rest of the night. Probably one of the scariest moments of my life. Years ago, I stayed with my grandparents for the summer while working at a vegetable packing facility in Stanwood, Washington. I worked the night shift from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., but one morning we got let out early around 3:30. My grandparents lived on the south end of Kamano Island, which was very dark at this time of the morning with basically zero streetlights, etc. I was driving a 1967 Ford Mustang, which had its fair share of issues, but never an issue with electronics in all the years I owned it. On this particular morning, though, halfway back to the house, the headlights, radio, interior dash lighting, etc. all shut off at the same time with no warning. No flickers, no static, just boom, dead. All those things are on different wiring harnesses or fuses in the car. The engine was still running, and I was going about 40 miles per hour and understandably slammed on the brakes as I could no longer see the road. I sat there in the dark for about 2 minutes, flipping the light switches with no result. I had no intention of shutting off the engine for fear that it might not start again. This was in the early 2000s, and I had a very basic cell phone, which I pulled out to call my grandfather on. The phone was also dead and would not turn on despite having been at least 50% charged before leaving work. Suddenly, without warning, the lights and everything came back on again. No static, flickers, etc. I hit the power button on my cell phone and it turned on, which freaked me out, and I booked it out of there back to my grandparents' house. To this day, I believe it was some kind of EMP test, but who knows? I will never forget it. You're probably right. I have a wooden floor in my house, and like it's almost impossible to not make it creak. Then, when I'm in my room playing video games, when I hear the floors creak, I have a cat, but it was like 2:30 a.m., so it was probably asleep. Since it's been a couple years since I'm kind of taking care of the cat, like feeding and emptying its litter box, now, when I play video games in my room, my cat comforts me more and sleeps in my bed. Never heard the creaks again. So was the cat. My sister used to live in a big house in the city in the UK, and one night my girlfriend and I were house sitting. Now, my sister always used to say she thought the house was haunted, that she had seen things or heard footsteps. Even her 5-year-old son at the time had claimed one night to have seen someone in the house and had a conversation with them, although my sister put this down to a sleepy 5-year-old's imagination. I was always a skeptic, but still interested in that kind of thing. So when my girlfriend and I are staying over, we have dinner, watch a movie and all that, and then we head off to bed and go to sleep. Now, I've always thought I have very good hearing. Not the best eyesight, but I can trust my ears. In the city, you hear lots. Foxes in the rubbish bins, people walking back from the city center, footsteps on the pavement, and that kind of thing. However, what woke me up that night or early morning wasn't footsteps from a few lads coming back from home after a drink or two. It was coming from inside the house. Specifically, stomping footsteps coming up the stairs, getting louder and louder and closer and closer. My eyes were wide open, staring at the bedroom door, waiting for what I wasn't sure, just waiting, but they kept on stomping up the steps, and then it was on the landing, going up and down in the hallway. This then woke my girlfriend up, who immediately clung to me and asked in a hushed but scared tone, "What was that?" Feigning a grumpy sleepiness, I said, Nothing, go back to sleep." And with that, I turned over but kept my eyes wide open on the bedroom door, heard nothing else, and then fell asleep. I sleep in a room at the roof. There is a wall, mostly windows. I have locked the door that open to the roof, and then I have locked the only room, in which I am at nearly 2:30. I wake up for no reason. My bed is adjacent to the window wall. The curtains are closed, but then I hear footsteps. It's coming just from the other side of the windows, and it's just going back and forth, clear and loud. Something is walking just inches away from my face. The door was locked, so no family member could be up in the roof. This is like the 3rd floor. One side of the house is just empty land, the other has a small house, so there is no way anyone can climb up. I froze at this realization. Then I moved to the other corner of the bed, covered myself with the sheets, and fell asleep. The next day I tell my mom, and she advises me not to speak up or go out if something happens again. Just keep quiet and don't let it know you're inside. Don't try to interact, let her pass. She will not harm you. What the F happened? And yes, things still happen, and I have grown to ignore them. Once, when I was probably about 12 years old, I was having a hard time getting to sleep. My younger brother, 10 years old, was sound asleep next to me. This was during the time when we shared a room and a bed. We were poor, and I was so frustrated because I was exhausted. I had been laying there, staring at the ceiling for what was probably hours when I rolled over to face him. I tried to close my eyes and drift off, but still to no avail. Then I opened my eyes and felt someone's warm, moist breath against my ear as a gentle voice told me to come outside. I was immediately filled with terror. I'd previously had what I thought to be paranormal experiences before, but never had I ever had anything speak to me before, let alone close enough for me to feel its face hovering above mine. And before anyone asks, no, it wasn't my brother. He had been known to talk in his sleep and even sleepwalk, but I was looking straight at him when this happened. His lips didn't move and he didn't get up, and he sure as hell didn't hover over me and whisper in my ear. especially considering the voice was feminine. It was similar to our mother's, but she had long gone to bed and my brother and I were facing the bedroom door. After I heard whatever it was tell me to come outside, I started to pray with my head under the covers until I cried myself to sleep. To this day, I have no idea what that was or why it wanted me to come outside, but I really didn't want to find out. So if a wispy, ethereal voice whispered in your ear in the middle of the night to go outside, would any of you go outside? A few weeks ago, I couldn't sleep and was lying awake at 3:21 a.m. when I heard my screen door open. It wasn't windy outside at all. There are places on the siding of the house that whistle and rattle before wind gets strong enough to mess with the screen door. Besides, this wasn't rattling. This was the distinct, loud sound of the screen door latch being released and the door opened. The house has settled recently, and the screen door is crooked now, so it's taken a fair amount of effort to unlatch it, and it's a very distinct series of sounds. Even worse, I realized I'd forgotten to lock the front door at all. I'd intended to take the trash out after taking the dogs out, then decided to blow it off until morning and just forgot to lock the door. So there's nothing stopping someone from just turning the handle and walking inside. I live alone, and there's nobody I know within an hour's drive of me. I would say the door was open about 30 seconds, then it was closed and relatched, which also requires deliberate effort and doesn't just happen if the door swings shut on its own. The whole thing appeared to be over by 3:23, but I was wide awake and tense AF after that. I tried to think of rational explanations, and the best I could come up with was that since our mail carrier often misdelivers mail between my neighbors and I, we often have to go around delivering the packages to their rightful owners. I was convinced that this was the case, but when I finally got the courage to open the front door in the morning, the screen door was securely latched with no package or envelope inside. I still have no idea who that was or what was going on. Once at my house, when I was around 12 or so, I invited my friends for a sleepover for my birthday after a night of laser tag. Around 3 in the morning or so, when everyone except me and my best friend, we heard a little girl's voice cry out, "Hello?" like she was distressed. I was instantly up and my friend was freaking out asking if I heard that. We stayed silent for a moment listening, me standing up and him halfway off the bed, when we heard the same voice one room over now. "Hello, I'm scared." He freaked and practically leapt at me when I made for the door. He was and still is freaked out by the thought of anything supernatural. I made my way over to the living room with him close behind when two shiny eyes slowly patted our way and we were greeted by my old Labrador named Kess, who wagged her tail to see us. She came from right where the voice was previously. After staring at each other for a few moments, we went back to my room with Kess in tow, who slept at my feet that night, occasionally stealing a glance at my now shut door. To this day, I still don't know what happened, but I recall everything so vividly, and it comes back to my mind every now and then. When I was younger, maybe 10 or 11, I was up way later than I should have been, and all of a sudden, I could hear two voices, a man and a woman if I recall correctly, talking outside my window. These weren't voices I recognized, and I hadn't heard any vehicles pull in, so I'm not sure where they came from or what they were doing there. They just spoke to each other as they walked past my window and presumably left. Not that creepy or unexplainable compared to other stories, but it freaked me out at the time.